It's not I've overcome, it's not we have overcome, it's he has overcome. Praise be to him. Oh man, Ryan's out there like, shh. Hey, we do ask parents if you ever send your kids like for the first time to children's church, if you wouldn't like mind stepping out real quick, make sure we have your kid's name and they don't just change it for fun. Not that a kid would ever do that. I don't know if anybody in here has any siblings. I have two younger siblings. I remind my mom and dad often that they should have stopped at me. But that's just kind of what you do. Anybody have siblings? Siblings? Any of you blessed to not have? No, I'm just kidding. Now, I love my sisters. It took me a while to get there. It's just, mom and dad came running my sister is just younger than me. She's about 2.5 years younger than me. Mom and dad came running in one morning because she was crying. And they said, what happened? I was like, I don't know. And they looked at her fingers, and her fingers had teeth marks on them. I said they looked like French fries. It's just great stuff. I've ruthlessly picked on my sisters through the years. I had the opportunity to see them this weekend. Had some family stuff going on. Our whole family kind of descended upon Indianapolis. Saw cousins I haven't seen in probably 2 decades. It was a good time. Saw my sisters, love them dearly. But man, I'm just ruthless towards my sisters sometimes. And by sometimes I mean days that end in the word day. It's just kind of, it's something I enjoy getting to do. Any older siblings, like oldest? So like you've signed the contract, you know what I'm talking about. There's all that nodding go. It's just so much fun to say that because I say it as a joke, but people are like, no, that's for real. And younger siblings, I'm not gonna talk about the babies in the room. But I lean in so hard to them sometimes. I just am ruthless. But that stops with me. Like I get to be relentless with my sisters, but no one else does. I remember I was my senior year in high school, and my dad had gotten a job out in Birmingham, Alabama. We lived in West Texas, so he moved around Christmas time, and it was just me and my sisters and my mom as I was finishing up my senior year. And I remember walking in one afternoon from tennis practice, and I walk into a scene of my mom sitting on the couch, flanked on either side by a sister, and everybody was crying. And I should have walked out, but I didn't. I said, so what's going on? And it was a boy issue. A boy had been mean to one of the sisters. So I was just like, where does he live? What's his name? It's time to take a drive. It was so good I didn't have an app on my phone back then. Now it's easy to find the boys that mess with my daughters. No one gets to mess with family. No one gets to mess with family. You can mess with family. You can even be talking to someone complaining about your family, and they like jump in and agree with you. You're like, hold on now. I didn't say you could. You can't. And that goes for, it's rough stuff. It's rough stuff. You know, we're in a series titled Messy People as we're looking at the book of Genesis. And Genesis is just filled with messy people. At first I wanted to call it Messy Families, but I didn't want to, that might have just hit a little too close to home too quickly for some of us. But really it's just, the world is just one big mess. People are messy. And for the last couple of weeks, we've just been leaning into the life of one of those families. So I kind of feel like this is the beginning to it's like a television show. So previously on Messy People, we've been kind of dealing with the life of Abram. So kind of speed everybody up. A guy named Abram was approached by God, and God said, hey, I'm going to make you great. I'm going to make your name great. I'm going to make you into a great nation. Your offspring are going to just overwhelm the earth to the point that no one's going to be able to count. And great things are going to come from your family, which is absolutely true because through the line of Abram, we were blessed with Jesus. It's just an incredible story. And as Abram begins his journey of following after God, God takes him to a place called Canaan, where he tells Abram, hey, this place is going to belong to you. Along for the ride was his wife Sarai and his nephew by the name of Lot. Well, during the famine, they found themselves over in Egypt to withstand the famine. Abram kind of took matters into his own hands at that time. Things turned out well, even though they could have turned out pretty dicey. Got sent back to the land of Canaan. And as they're there, they find themselves at such a large number now that the people taking care of Abram's herds are at odds with the people taking care of Lot's herds, to where the kinsmen were at odds with one another. There was strife between those two families. So Abram in wisdom came to Lot and said, hey, let's separate. If you go west, I'll go east. If you go east, I'll go west. All while saying that, Abram was standing right on the land that God had already promised him. But Abram was willing to go, hey, listen, I'm going to trust in God. You pick what you want. Lot looked around and decided to go to the east. There was a land over there that was well watered always. It looked really good. He went that way. Abram got the very land that had been promised to him. The land that Lot picked was filled with individuals that are identified as being evil men who sinned greatly against God. But that's where Lot decided to go, because the grass was greener on the other side of the sea. That's not the name of that's not the saying, but that's actually what happens. And so Lot goes there, Abram stays where he's at, and then as we looked at last week, God then comes in and he assures Abram, he reminds him of his blessing by kind of leaning into some guarantees. Hey, I guarantee that your land is going to be great. It's going to stay with you. Your offspring is going to multiply, and I will always be with you. For God is a God who keeps his promises. And so today's episode of Messy People opens with an international skirmish that is right there in the middle of the land in which Abram and Lot live. So if you have a Bible, and I hope that you do, turn with me to Genesis chapter 14. We're going to start reading here in just a little bit down in verse number 13, and what I'd like to do is just kind of tell the story of the first 12 verses. They're filled with all kinds of really hard names, some that I really don't want to pronounce because I'm going to get them wrong, which seminary taught me, if I don't know a name, say it with confidence, and most people won't know what you're saying. But they didn't have Greg as their associate pastor, who's smarter than them. And so he's so gracious. He wouldn't do that. He might, but he would do it like in a really sweet, kind way, and that'd be awesome. As one day he would say the word, and I'd be like, "What word are you saying? That word you said wrong a couple weeks ago." And I'd be like, I'm so sorry. So I'd like to just kind of tell the story of what's happening. And really, it is an international skirmish. If we were to look at a map of where all these groups of individuals were from, it's kind of the known world at that time. So here's what happens in the land that Lot was living in. There were kind of four kingdoms that lived in that land. We're going to call them the West. We good with that? We're going to call them the West. And these kings in the West, for 12 years, had paid tribute to four kings, predominantly one king by the name of Kedorlaomer, and which sounds like something out of Lord of the Rings. And Kedorlaomer was kind of the leading king of these four kings, and they were from the east. So this morning, we're going to lean into, it's going to kind of be like the All-Star game. It's going to be the East versus the West. There were four kings in the east, and then 5 kings in the west. Well, the 5 kings in the west had paid tribute to the 4 kings in the east for 12 years, and in the 13th year, it says they rebelled. They got sick of paying tribute to these kings. Now, the kings in the east, they were from the lands of Elam, Shinar, Elisar, and Goim. And if we were to look at those lands right now, one was from like modern day Iran, one was from Iraq, and the other 2 were from like Syria, Turkey, which is an incredible expanse of land. And these 4 kings, now being told by these 5 kings that they're no longer going to pay tribute to them, they decide to make the journey all the way over to the land where Sodom is located to have a field day with them. And so these armies of these kings begin to make their journey, and as they journey toward these 5 kings, everywhere that they go, they just clean everyone's clock. Down in around verse number 5, some of the people they start to defeat. We see they defeated the Rephaim, the Zuzim, the Emim, which it's like a Dr. Seuss book. I mean, like, for real. Anybody ever read A Walk It in My Pocket? I mean, if you haven't, you're wrong. Go home today, read A Walk in My Pocket. It's a good one. It kind of feels like this, or like, Horton, the Who guy. Anyway, defeated the Horites, down in verse number 7, defeated the Amalekites, and then the Amorites, and everywhere they went, as they're moving, they come over from the east, so they're moving westward, and then they go like due south, and everywhere they go, they're just beating them up. And they come down to the valley of Siddim. And here in the Valley of Siddim, they battle against these 5 kings. The 5 kings make up the lands of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Bela, which is then kind of changes to Zor. And that's they fight against one another, and it's not even a real fight. The 4 kings from the east absolutely clean up the people from the west. They decimate them. They kick their 4th points of contact. They are utterly just made to look bad. Verse number 10, it says, now the valley of Siddim was full of bitumen pits, which are tar pits, and as the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled, they fell into some of them fell into them, which that's just like embarrassing. The rest fled to the hill country. And this is what the enemy did. So the enemy took all the possessions of Sodom and Gomorrah and all their provisions, and they went their way. Now, if the story had stopped there, I think we'd have a very different ending. But they made a mistake. You ever, had something, you had 95% of something, but you really wanted that last 5% of something, and then you got that last 5% of something, and it was like you had 0% of something? It just went sideways. That's what happens here. See, they didn't just take the possessions. Look at verse number 12. They also took Lot, the son of Abram's brother, who was dwelling in Sodom, and his possessions, and went their way. Now, we've leaned into the individual of Lot for the last couple of weeks, and we're going to continue to do so because, as Dave Ramsey would say, he's done stupid with zeros on the end of it. I mean, he just could not get out of his own way. I would refer to him as a knucklehead. Just kind of made some really poor decisions. And this is Abram's nephew. So Abram, in his right, he would get to be like, man, that Lot, idiot, moron, makes really bad decisions. But Abram's his uncle. Kind of back to the whole siblings thing. You can get on your own family, but other people better not mess with your family. So these 4 kings from the east come down. They just absolutely decimate the 5 kings from the west, and they take not just their possessions, but they also take Lot. And it's at this point that word comes to Abram, and the way that Abram responds is we see that he is a faithful follower of God who is also a faithful family member and a faithful friend. And he carries with him some characteristics that I really think we can lean into this morning. So let's look at this passage, starting verse number 13, about how Abram responds. It says, then one who had escaped came and told Abram the Hebrew, who was living by the oaks of Mamre, the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and of Aner. These were allies of Abram. When Abram heard that his kinsman had been taken captive, he led forth his trained men, born in his house, 318 of them, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. And he divided his forces against them by night, and he and his servants, and defeated them and pursued them to Hobah, north of Damascus. Then he brought back all the possessions and also brought back his kinsman Lot with his possessions and the women and the people. So here's a few things that Abram does as a faithful follower of the Lord, but really as a faithful friend. The first is this, is that we see that Abram listens to what's taking place. There in verse number 13, someone who had escaped came to Abram and told him everything that had happened. And upon hearing what had happened, he decides to act. See, when Abram first got word that something bad had happened to Lot, he kind of had a choice in front of him. He could either choose to ignore the message, or he could choose to listen to the message. And he chose to listen. He chose to not just listen to what was happening, but to absorb the information and to see how he was going to respond on the backside. I don't know how fast information would have traveled back then, but I know it wasn't as fast as it would be today. Perhaps Abram would have known that these kings had come down kind of on some kind of journey to take back what they felt was theirs, that belonged to them. But he would have had no idea in real time what was happening with Lot and his family. We don't know if Lot went out to fight with the king of Sodom since he was living in his land. All we know is that once word comes to Abram, he listens, and he doesn't just listen, he listens intently. He listened for the problem, and then he paid attention to the details. And because of his faithfulness to God, and not just faithfulness to the Lord, but also faithfulness to his kinsmen, to his family, to his friends, he doesn't just listen, he also then responds to what was happening. It says, once he heard, verse 14, that his kinsman had been taken. Now, real quick, and I don't even think we touched on this in the first service. He didn't say, oh my goodness, we lost all our stuff. What was his concern? We've lost someone that we love. He couldn't care less about the stuff. He was concerned about his nephew. When he heard that his kinsman had been taken, he led forth his trained men born in his house, 318, and went and pursued them up north into Dan. I think there are a couple significant things that happened here. Well, one, kind of in the background of all this happening, Abram and his family are on the west side of the sea. They're not going to have any engagement and interaction with these kings that are coming to conquer. Abram was safe. I think another significant thing that we can lean into, and that this is where we kind of have to be very honest with ourselves, is Lot had made the decision to live where he lived. He'd made the decision to live where he lived based off a worldly decision, not a God-driven trust. He looked out and saw that the land was well watered, and that's why he wanted to move there. Even though he knew the land was filled with evil people who greatly sinned against the Lord, he still picked Sodom. So I think it's not just significant that Abram was safe and he could just be like, hey dude, my family's taken care of. I think it's also significant that he could have gone, man, no, this is Lot's fault. This isn't mine. Lot did this to himself. Lot chose poorly. You ever find yourself doing that with people? They make a poor decision and you just kind of want to step back and go, maybe they earned this. I'm not saying anybody here would ever do that, or myself. So he responds. He responds by taking his 318 trained men. He takes along with him, I believe, the allies of Eshcol and Aner with him, and he decides to pursue these individuals. And it's part of his response. And in doing that, I want us to notice a couple things. One, I want you to see the confidence that Abram had as he went after this army. How many people did he take with him? I mean, we know that there were the allies that he would have gone with him. We don't know a number there. But how many people from his own house did he take? 318. Not 317, not 319. He took 318 people. 318 individuals that had been trained in his house. He took them with him. Now, this isn't a big number. This is a small number. It's specific, but it's small. How is it that Abram could have had this kind of confidence in going after these kings? Well, I believe the confidence that Abram had was rooted in the promise that God had already made, that his name would be made great. And who was it that was going to make his name great? It was going to be God. Remember a couple weeks ago as we looked through the call that God placed on Abram's life, time and time again we see the words of the Lord to Abram, I will, I will, I will. Abram's interest is piqued, not because the possessions have been lost, but because his kinsman has been taken, and he was able to lean into the words of God will make his name great. And my name great along the way. It's all right, 318 dudes, let's go. And they made their way to Dan, which was about 150 miles north of where they were living. And then as they found them there, they then traveled another 50 miles before the whole incident was complete. Now, we look at that, and that's kind of an insignificant number. I mean, a 200-mile trip is not a small thing, but then it's kind of no big thing. I mean, Thursday afternoon, our family got into the car, and we drove to Indianapolis, which is worked great for an illustration. It's 200 miles away. And then yesterday at 2 o'clock, we got in the car and drove back 200 miles, and it only took us 2.5 hours because of time change, not because I drove fast. I mean, it was just kind of easy. 200 miles in this time, that was no small matter. It would have taken probably at least a week to make the journey, to catch up with them. And when he catches up with them, he puts this plan in place where he divides his forces, verse number 15, against them in the night, where one group probably came around one direction, another group came in another direction, probably came in from behind during the night as a smaller force. And within 50 miles, they had defeated them, pursued them to Hobah, north of Damascus, and brought everyone back home. He was faithful in that he listened. He was faithful in his response, but also see the faithfulness of Abram, not just toward God, but also toward his kinsmen, and that he was faithful as he restored Lot back to where he was from. Verse number 16. Then he brought back all the possessions. So we saw his possessions restored, and also brought back his kinsman Lot with his possessions and the women and the people. Lot was restored. It's kind of in this moment that I step back and go, how can we be faithful? Not just faithful to the Lord, but how can we be faithful to our kinsmen? How can we be faithful to our friends? Carrying some of the same characteristics that Abram carried. I think one of the ways that we can be faithful to those that we care so deeply for is that we can be people who are intentionally listening to the troubles and concerns of those that we care for and care about. And to listen intently. When people come to us with life situations, it can be so easy to kind of haphazardly listen while being consumed with other things. But have you ever talked to somebody that was such a good listener, you felt like they were looking deep into your soul while they listened to you? I think our faithfulness towards those that we care about is greatly enhancing to the relationship when we take the time to listen to those concerns. And to lean in and to be, not just to listen, but to then be genuinely concerned with what's going on in their lives. We live in such a fast-paced world to where we miss the opportunity to listen. My grandmother was a great listener. I heard many stories this last week of my cousins and then great-grandchildren that every time they were with Grandma, she asked great questions and just wanted to listen. A faithful friend is a good listener. A faithful friend is also willing to respond in some way, shape, or form, not passively, but actively. Now, I want to be careful that we not get out of control with the one-to-one correlation here. I am not saying when your friends come to you with concerns that you need to go beat up the people that messed with them. That is not what I'm saying. There's a great little video out there of a dad that plays a prank on his two daughters. The two girls are, I would say, this morning just kind of hit me. I was already sharing with somebody this morning. Two girls are like the Supergirls ages. That's just kind of what they look like. And I could see Caleb doing something like this. But anyway, the dad comes in and is like, all right, girls, I've gotten into a fight with somebody and he wants to beat me up, so we're going to get in a fight, but he has two younger daughters and I need you to come with me. One of you's going to take one, one's going to take the other. Let's go. And it's hilarious, the response. Because the older girl, probably like 7, 8, something like that. The older daughter just like has some questions that she needs to ask. Like, how big are they? What's going on? The younger girl doesn't need to ask questions. She's like, sounds great. Let's go. And she starts like walking. She's like jumping up and down. And I'm like, wow, what kind of kiddo did you raise there? The second child kind of kiddo. And so, scrappy. She was ready to go. I absolutely love that. That's not what I'm telling you to do. I'm not telling you when people come to you and say, man, so-and-so's really upset me, you say, well, let's go take care of him. How big a fella is he? That's not what we're leaning into. But there are ways that we can genuinely respond to those that share with us their concerns. And know this, if you're willing to actually if someone's willing to sit down with you and open up their heart to you and share the things that matter to them, that is a hard thing for them to do to start with. I think one way that we can respond is to respond with our presence. When our loved ones, our friends are going through difficult times, to be present with them while they're going through those times. It's a sacrifice on your part. It's going to take time, but I believe it's time worth it. I think a way that we minimize, but is really of utmost importance, is a way that you can actively support those that are willing to let you know what's going on in their life. Is you don't just respond to them with their presence, you respond to them with a commitment to genuinely pray for them. Who's bigger, your abilities or God's? It's always God. And I'm not saying every time that we pray something, God's gonna, like some little obedient child, come in and do what we want to be done. That's not how God works. But we seek the one who knows best. We seek the face of the one who can provide. One of the sweet stories that I heard this week about my grandma was told by one of my cousins. Her name's Mindy. Within the last year or so, I think, Mindy had been visiting grandma, and her microwave had gone out. And Grandma was telling Mindy about this. And so Mindy said, but Grandma said, I think we need to pray that the Lord will provide a microwave. And she laughed. She was like, really? Like, I can go buy you a microwave. We can do that. She's like, no, I think we need to pray about a microwave. And Mindy said, this is just kind of ridiculous. But Grandma right there is like, no, we're going to pray. And my grandmother was a praying woman. Said near the end of her life, she made my cousin sit down with her so she could make sure that she could still remember the name of every grandchild and great-grandchild, which are numbers of 13 and 31. And she prayed for them daily. So she said, let's pray for a microwave. So she prayed for a microwave. And Mindy left and thought that was absolutely ridiculous. So as she's driving home, she's thinking, you know what? I'm going to answer that prayer with my resources. And I'm going to do what? Go buy a microwave. So as she's driving home, she passes one of her friend's houses. And walking out of his house is her friend carrying an industrial-sized microwave. Grandma prayed big prayers. He's struggling out with this microwave and places it on the side of the road. Mindy gets out and talks to him and goes, what are you doing? He's like, I just bought a smaller microwave because this thing is gigantic. So I just put it on the side of the road in case anyone needed a microwave. So they load the microwave into Mindy's car. Mindy does a U-turn and drives back to Grandma's place, crying the whole time because Grandma prayed for a microwave. If only we'd known, we would have had Grandma pray about other things as well. We find ourselves to be faithful friends, not just when we listen, but when we respond. And one of the greatest ways that we can respond is to be present with those who are in need and to actively call upon the one who can bring peace. And the final thing I want us to see, lessons from being a faithful friend, from someone who is faithful to his kinsman, is to have restoration be the goal in the life of those that we care for. And really that should be the goal in the life of people that we just know. Is that we want to see people restored into a right relationship with the Lord. And I thought a lot about this whole interaction between Abram and Lot. when the word came to Abram about Lot being captured. Like, it's one of those, man, I'm so glad I wasn't there. It's good for Lot I wasn't Abram. Because I'd been like, man, it got what he deserved. He decided to move there. Those are evil people sinning greatly against the Lord, because I've never sinned greatly against the Lord. That's not what he did. He went after him. And I wonder why. I think it would be, I don't think it's a stretch to say that Lot, at that point in his life, would have been wayward in his relationship with God. And I don't think that's a stretch to say that. We'll see here over the next few weeks that Lot was making poor decision after poor decision and was unwilling to, and by poor decision, I mean, set his family up to be a family of sin that was bent on things not of God. That was Lot's life. And I can't help but wonder if Abram went after Lot because he knew that Lot needed to come back to the Lord. And we find ourselves interacting with our family, our kinsmen, our friends, and when they make poor decisions, when they've been wayward, when they've been knuckleheads themselves, instead of just casting them aside, should our desire not be to see them restored into a right relationship with Jesus? Which means we just can't throw people away. And I'm not saying for a moment to compromise. Did you know that you can be faithful and true to God, love people in your life, and not compromise truth? You can do that very thing. And oftentimes, it's your unwillingness to compromise truth, yet remain loving toward that person with an open invitation to come back to Jesus, that oftentimes is the catalyst to that person saying, man, I've seen Jesus in you and I need to come back. See, church, I think if we live lives of being faithful followers of the Lord, we will also be faithful friends to those around us, seeking to see people restored into a right relationship with Jesus. So I ask you this morning, maybe you're here this morning and you're the knucklehead. I mean, and you don't have to go public with that, but maybe you know that you've journeyed away from the Lord and you're the one who needs to be restored. Man, come back to Jesus. Or if you're here this morning and you've never entered into a relationship with the Lord, come to Jesus today. But if you're sitting here this morning and you're faithfully following after God, I encourage you just kind of this week to do an inventory of the people in your life and who needs you to step into their life as a faithful friend, to listen, to respond, and to see them maybe restored into a right relationship with Jesus. Because I believe that's where Jesus wants them, is right with him. It's hard to do, but I think it's worth doing. I invite you to bow your heads and close your eyes as we prepare to kind of respond to the Lord. Invite our praise team up as they're going to lead us in one final song. And just as you sit there, just in a posture of prayer, and if you're the person here this morning who is wayward, you're not following after the Lord, right now I am going to ask you to call upon the name of God. Cry out to him. Confess your sin, knowing that he alone is faithful and just to forgive you of your sin and to cleanse you from all unrighteousness. Let today be the coming back day. But for others who are here this morning, you love the Lord and you want to not just be faithful to him, but you want to be faithful to those that are in your life. Will you allow yourself to be challenged and for God to identify a name for you of someone that you need to be praying for? Maybe someone that needs to have you reach out to them and let them know that you're there to listen. You're there to walk with them, all while pointing them back to Jesus. Father, we love you. God, we are so desperate for you. Father, help us know and help us be a people who are faithful not only to you, but faithful to live our lives in such a way to where we want to see more people come to Jesus. And it's in his name that I pray. Amen. Church, I invite you to stand as we respond to the Lord. I'll be down here in the front. Would love to pray with you. Or grab someone